Hey everybody, Jason Sherman here. In today's episode of Zero to CEO, I'm going to speak to business communication expert Davina Stanley. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for having me.
And we're going to explore how to distill messages that engage VC partners or senior leaders, board members. I'm in the middle of fundraising with VCs and getting a board put together. So this is actually a really relevant episode for my listeners since they're always asking me these questions. So I'm going to relay their questions through me to you.
Brilliant. Okay, good.
And I guess one of the first ones I always get is, how do you effectively communicate with, let's say, a VC or a partner about the things that you're doing in your organization? Because, I have so many updates. What am I supposed to tell them? It's so much, what's too much and what's too little?
I think that's a really fabulous question because there's a real temptation to say, here's what I've done and here's the activity that we've been undertaking, when in actual fact, the board members, the VC partners are really looking for what have you delivered. But even more than that, I think when you think of an update opportunity and step back from that, what you really have is your ears and your eyes of your VC partners who are there to help you with your business. And so even more than just saying, oh, it's an update, an update is really a scheduled appointment to have a conversation. And you step back and think, well, what do I really want to get out of this conversation? What would be most helpful to the business and to the VC partners as well? It's two-way. And so think, well, what would be the outcome from this? Could it be actually that I want them to understand some really big shifts in the way we're thinking about something that's really positive? Or could it be that I want to prepare them for some headwinds that I see coming that we've got plans to address?
Interesting.
We've been going really
or
well.
like that you identified a trend in the market or something that is relevant to your space that you should potentially think about, and you want to bring it up to them before you do it to see what they think.
Yeah. Or think about your strategy for capturing it. So you might imagine, I work a lot with patterns and structures. I use a structured thinking discipline, and I have 10 patterns that I like to use when I'm helping people map their stories, partly because when you see something that's sort of close, it's easier than going from the bottom up and trying to sort all the ideas into place. Obviously, they have to match, but I think it just helps people leapfrog. And so one of those is called top up. And what we do is we say, okay, things have been going really well. Lots of great things have happened. So you can get through, we've delivered against all of these things that we need to do. In fact, let me rename that. I'm actually talking through a different one, but it's called change tack. So, we've been going really well. And however, and this is where you say, okay, we've seen an opportunity that would help us accelerate. Maybe AI is giving us some ideas about how we might do things more quickly. Or maybe AI is posing some threats to us. Or
like our business might be put out of business because of AI, which is happening a lot lately, right?
Both things.
So you bring up a good point when talking to a partner or VC or whatnot, and you're going to deliver, I guess, like a document or an email update, like here's what we've done, here's what we've delivered, here's what we're thinking about. Is it a good idea to kind of say these are my weaknesses and to point where they can help you, or is it more like opening up like a potential gap, like, hey, you're not fit to lead this company because you can't fix this problem, and we want to vote you out now.
Well, that's a really interesting piece, isn't it? Because I was talking to a VC fellow yesterday, and he wants me to help him with his team. But one of the things that he was talking about was the things he's looking for in companies that he would invest in. And the character of the leaders is almost number one. It's not the only, but if all other things are equal, then character of the leaders, is essential. And
let's talk about that for 1 second. When you say the character of a leader, what are they looking for specifically?
I didn't dive into it deeply enough with him to give you his definition, but my husband is also a funds manager, so I'll draw on that and other things I've seen. So I think honesty and integrity, number one, right? When you say something, do you really mean it?
Right.
When you say something, will you deliver on it?
Mm-hmm.
How do you is there a sense of truth around what you're saying, which I think speaks to what your concerns are there. So there is a fine line to say, hey, here's a challenge that we've got. But the issue is not so much, I think, that here's the challenge. Everyone knows.
Right.
Everybody has imperfections.
You're almost mentioning like a reliability, right? Like if this person is saying like, I can deliver this feature or this product, and then they actually deliver it, they're reliable enough so you start to trust them, right? And it becomes
correct.
Like, yeah.
I think a step further than that, though, there's humility and saying, okay, so if I have a weakness, then am I in tune enough with myself to know what that might be, and therefore how to compensate for that? So, in my team, I have somebody who is so good. In fact, I have two of them now who are exceptional at checking detail, right? Now, I can do that, but I hate doing that.
You delegate it.
If I'm in a hurry, I'm not going to do it well. So why would I? I know that that's me. So I have, people there to help me, and I empower them to help me with that because I know I need it,
right.
And so I think if you take it with that lens of that quiet confidence added with a bit of humility to say, look, I'm pretty open and I know myself really well here. And if I don't know myself really well, then I can't deliver for you because I'm not going to have the right people in the team. I'm going to pretend that I can do everything because I'm afraid to tell you what I can't. And look, I imagine there are VC partners who are ruthless about that, but really good quality ones, I can't imagine not factoring that sense of humanity in. You can't be successful if you don't, in my opinion.
Let's hit the title, which is Distilling Messages, right? So the whole point of the podcast, this is all fascinating, and I'm sure people are going to be like, thank you for asking all those questions. But let's talk a little bit about the actual documentation, like, emails, PowerPoint presentations, papers that you have to, present, and how cutting through it quickly is possibly more important than how long it is.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I love to say speed to read is so much more important than length of document, pages or word count. I think the page or word count is a bit of a crude way of saying, I want to get through this quickly. So I think that having a very clear hierarchy in your messaging is really important. Key people want to skim. They want to read your document very quickly. They want to know the ideas very early so that they can have a hypothesis as to what their reaction might be to it. They want to be able to respond quickly. They don't want to hold you up. And if you write in such a way that you're building the tension towards the great finale at the end, you lose them on the way. You require them to read toward the end to find out what the things are and find your logic. And
can you walk me through that
together? Yeah, absolutely.
So I would love an example.
Oh, okay. So I think people who talk about, marketing sort of people, or people perhaps who have a literary artistic background, will often talk about the value in drawing your audience in and holding back and unpacking all of the details. Scientific people think this way too. I've got to tell them all of the things so that by the time they get to the conclusion or the recommendation, I've explained my logic, where in actual fact, it works in reverse. Because you lose everyone on the way.
They fall asleep.
Yeah, and you're asking them to follow your own thinking journey, like to
do
your
own thought process. Yeah.
Yeah. So instead, what I teach people to do is have a really short introduction that step one says, what are we talking about and why? And then that sets up, it pulls the audience in really fast. And I'm talking a couple of sentences in a board paper. I'm not talking long, really short. And then say, bang, here is your main message. And this has got to be insightful. It's got to be impactful. It's got to be interesting. It's got to be news,
It has to draw the reader in, right? I mean, it has to capture their attention. Kind of like a movie trailer almost.
I suppose so. Yeah, very much actually. And then you've got your main message. And then you say, well, maybe let's just pretend that the message is everything's on track. There's nothing to see here. That's broadly the message. And you say, well, why is that true? And then you have the high level messages that sit underneath that are all reasons, because that's the question you've in sort of intrigued your audience to ask. So 3 reasons why it's all on track. The things we've delivered, things we promised have been delivered for this quarter. The things that we're working on now are progressing really well to plan. And the things that we're planning for, we've set up to succeed also. 3 reasons why everything's on track. So you can give that and then layer into the detail. And
I would think also by doing this, you're allowing everyone to participate in your thought process on a high level, while still allowing for certain members who are reading your document or your high level concept to then ping you later to say, hey, I want to talk more about that point that you mentioned in your document. Is that kind of what the point is? Okay.
Yeah. And I think about it 3 ways. So clarity, quality, and velocity of communication. So clarity meaning I can find the message. I can see it. There is one single message, and I can find it. Step 1. And so that requires the thinking to be clear enough that you can actually distill it to one single sentence of 25 words or less. But it also means that you've presented it in the document in a way that's easy to find. There's white space around it. Maybe it's bold. It's easy to find. So clarity, you can find it. Quality, when you do find it, it's like, oh, that's useful. That's interesting. That's helpful. Or I need to do something about that. You get a really helpful response. Velocity is all about the speed to create it and the speed of actually being able to action it. So if I get your email, I open it because the subject line grabs my attention. It's relevant. It's not just update. It's actually something meaningful. I open it. I can find the key thoughts and I can choose how I navigate my way through it really quickly because I can skim it to see the high level messaging and then think, oh, that's fantastic. That's all I need to know. Great. Or, great. First 2 sections. Yeah, terrific. But I want to know those plans for the future. So I'm going to read that in more depth and can't do it now, but I am definitely going to do that tomorrow.
And I'll respond and ask more for maybe for a meeting. And I want to go back to the beginning. You mentioned AI and how it could potentially disrupt. How do you feel about a CEO, someone like me, for example, who runs a startup with, say, 20 people, and I'm constantly trying to navigate marketing, development, technology, business, finance, and how to position our vision in the market, et cetera. And there's a million high-level things happening all day long, right? And I can't possibly tell everybody everything, but I do my best to supply as much documentation as possible. How do you feel about someone taking that information and using AI to condense it into your 25-word paragraph and sending it out?
Well, I think AI can summarize the information that it's got in place. Okay, so if you give it some information or you're asking it to do some research for you, it can tell you what it found and it can summarize that data. What it can't do is connect that data to your context and make it relevant. So the human piece, and talking about that 25-word sentence, I think if it adds value, it needs still, at least, maybe not forever, but today, needs a human to say, okay, here are all these facts that maybe, some good prompts have helped me gather using ChatGPT or one of the tools.
Right.
And I've asked it, and I find I need to be very explicit when I do use it to say, make the reading age really low so it's actually really easy to read. I don't find they write naturally. I find they can be quite wordy. I need it categorized. I need it, I've got to give it some real prompts to make it tight, but that's okay. It can summarize. Then I need to look at that and say, what does that mean in my current context? That's what the data says, but what does it actually mean? How is it relevant? And I don't know any tool that can do that. That's what humans are for. That's the value that we bring.
We're creative. We're creative animals, right? That's kind of what we are.
Yeah. And it's where we have to think. And I think this is where leveraging our team becomes very helpful, but also risky. Again, alluding back to this conversation I had yesterday, this gentleman was saying, I really want my people to know how to think.
Right.
I want you to help them how to structure their thinking because, they give me drafts that they've sourced from ChatGPT or wherever, and they just cut and paste it in. Like, not good enough.
Yeah, you can't do that. Yeah. No. And you mentioned your team, and let's wrap up with where people can find out more about what you do and your thinking process and how you help clients and where they can find you online.
Wonderful. Okay. So clarityfirstprogram.com is my website, and you can learn about my books. I've got 2 new ones coming out early in the new year, one called Elevate for Leaders, to help them set their teams up to write papers they don't need to rewrite, and then Engage, the companion book for the team doing the actual writing themselves. I've got online courses that you can do at a self-paced type, or my board paper bootcamp, which is hosted on maven.com. So you can find all of that at clarityfirstprogram.com.
Awesome, Davina. Thank you so much. This was great. People are going to learn a lot from this episode. And as always, we'll see you guys in the next one.